Hey everybody, Hutch here, and today we're going to talk about Miaw-Trader's LP tower, otherwise known as the Luna-HODL. And when I first heard about the Luna-HODL, I thought, oh man, what is this thing? I want to HODL more Luna. You probably want to HODL more Luna. How does it work? And there's not a lot of good information out there. So I was asking around, and people have been asking me lately, and I decided just to ape into this thing, not exactly ape in, to chimp into the Luna-HODL position. And like a good scientist with a control group and an experimental group, the exact same assets that I put inside the Luna-HODL, I actually put outside the Luna-HODL separately to see how they behaved over the exact same time period, to see if they did something different and unique, and indeed they do. And that's what I'm going to share in this video. Before we do, I want to talk about the concept of what the Luna-HODL is. And before we get into that, we have to understand what an LP is. So an LP is a liquidity pool, and a liquidity pool is provided to an AMM, or automated market maker, for people who want to trade on DeFi, decentralized finance. So in centralized finance, if you wanted to trade something like Luna and UST, there's a market maker there that is willing to facilitate all this. On DeFi, there's just software, the automated market maker, and the DeFi citizenry, you and I, have the opportunity to provide liquidity to the AMM and share in those fees, which is pretty cool. And what happens in all LPs is you end up with more of the stronger position of the LP, or put another way, just using Luna and UST, when the value of Luna goes up, essentially more people are buying Luna than selling it. And so they're buying away your Luna and they're providing you with more UST. Now the value of your entire position rises because the price rises, but in an LP, there needs to be a perfect balance in dollar value between the two assets. So naturally, you'll end up with less Luna, more UST as the value rises. Conversely, when the value of Luna goes down, essentially more people are selling Luna than buying it. And so they're giving us their Luna in exchange for our UST. So we'll end up with a disproportionate amount of Luna since they're selling it away to us and they're buying away our UST in the pool. But the whole value of the entire position goes down. Now this is important. Why? Because in the Luna-HODL, there's two LPs. There's the Luna UST LP on one side, and there's the Luna bLUNA LP on the other side. This is when people are swapping Luna for bLUNA to manage their loan on Anchor, or maybe there's volatility and they want swaps. So these two LPs are within the Luna-HODL. So another way to look at it is Luna-HODL is really just an LP of two LPs. Ooh. So how does that look? How that looks, just like with the different positions, as one LP becomes stronger in value, it will naturally rebalance and give you equal parts of the weaker LP. And so what I realize that happens in any market condition, since the Luna UST LP naturally creates more fees. As we can see here on CoinHall, the Luna UST LP for the last 7 days has been yielding a 52% APR. That's because more people are trading Luna for UST, whether they're buying or selling, than the Luna bLUNA pool, where that's a smaller subset of people who are either borrowing from Anchor and they need to provide bLUNA, or they understand about these swap arbitrage opportunities, and so they're trading in there. But you can see the APR is only about 10%. So the amount of volume, and you can see right here on the Luna UST, is 170 million UST worth over the last 7 days, compared to on the Luna bLUNA, it's only about $441,000 worth. So what's naturally going to happen? Well, the Luna UST pool will become stronger as a pool, but then the Luna-HODL that rebalances will naturally scrape some winnings from there, some value from there, if you will, and allocate more to the Luna bLUNA, which at the end of the day is going to help you HODL more Luna. And we can see that when we actually look to see about how we would actually use this. If we look at the provide, right, over here, there's two different buttons to provide the components of the LP, the two different LPs, the Luna bLUNA and the Luna UST. You can see I don't have any right now, but if I just typed in a number, watch, if I just type in 10 LP tokens of the Luna bLUNA, the equal amounts of the Luna UST tokens are 53. Now, these are kind of arbitrary numbers, but I think it's interesting that they're very similar to the yields we just saw. So I don't know if that was just a coincidence or what, but I thought it was really interesting that I was going to provide about 5x the amount of Luna UST LP tokens than Luna bLUNA, and that the yield of those were about 5x what the other was. So really, really interesting. You can see I don't have any to provide now, and just to show you all how to do it, what you do is you go to Terraswap, and you don't start with swap. You actually start with provide, and let's just start with the UST part. I actually wanted to equalize the number of Luna so I could keep track of it. So I provided 30 Luna for the Luna UST pool total, and that equals 2698 of UST. Not too far off from where it was when I did it. I think it was about 2578, because Luna's, both times they were in the 80s. And then after I provide this, I actually provided 30 Luna and the corresponding number of bLUNA. Don't look like UST, look like bLUNA. It doesn't want to look like, there it does. Now it wants to look like bLUNA. And so back then I provided 30 Luna. It wasn't quite this much. There's a little bit more of an arbitrage here. So now you have to provide 30.517 bLUNA. If I go back to the time, you can see I provided 30 Luna and 30.139955 bLUNA. And again, 30 Luna and 2578. And that got me all these LP tokens. I went back to Luna-HODL to provide half. Here, I didn't want to provide them all. I wanted to provide half and keep half outside. What was interesting, though, is I couldn't provide exactly half. So I'll show you the smart contract language. I eventually had to just equalize with UST. So you could see with the UST part, I did exactly half. So that's the actual balance that increased allowance was providing it to the Luna-HODL on Miaw-Trader. And you can see the 613,26899. If I multiply that by 2, that's actually the exact number of LP tokens that I had when I did that initial deposit transaction or provide transaction of the 30 Luna and the 2578 LP. Cool. You would think it would be exactly the same for the Luna bLUNA, but it wasn't. So you can see here I had 21.395838 LP tokens. But when I went to go provide it, remember the Luna-HODL makes me provide, like it picks, I type in one, but it then picks the amount of the other. It had me provide 10.766, there's no decimal point, but it's 10.766179. And when I multiply that by 2, you can see that actually equals more than what I actually had in the Luna bLUNA. So things started out a little bit skewed and there was nothing I can do about it, but don't worry, I account for this in my calculations and I think my thesis still holds true. So let me just show you where I started. This is the time period that I entered into this position. The first highlight at 8 p.m. on January 15th, this is where Luna was. It was in the mid to high 80s. And where I exited the position over here on, it was like 8:40 p.m. on January 20th is where I exited. The total value of the pool went down, and you're going to see what we did step by step. Now, if we look at the beginning, that difference in calculation, what I did is I added up the total Luna in the Luna-HODL, because you can see here, there's not a differentiation of the two LPs like there is in the purple. That's just 8 board for the part that was in Terraswap. It denotes this is the Luna UST pool and this is the Luna bLUNA pool. And you can see what's interesting is I took the screenshot right after. The Luna-HODL isolated by the exact dollar amount. So there's $1,289.07 in both the Luna-HODL and the Luna UST pool. What's interesting is if I added up all the Luna and bLUNA in the Luna-HODL, it actually ends up with a little bit more than the total Luna added up from the two different Terraswap pools. In fact, there was 0.26 extra Luna in the pool, which was kind of interesting, even though the dollar amount was the same. It's okay. What we're going to see is as Luna moves in price, there's a different form of rebalancing. So not really a lot of action on by 24 hours on the next day. Luna moved from 86.22 to 84.30. And what you can see is the differential was almost the same. So instead of 0.26, it was 0.25. There was an extra dollar in the Luna-HODL, which was interesting. But by the next day, if we look at Monday at 10 p.m., this gets really interesting. So notice the differential of the amount of total Luna, including the bLUNA. Now instead of 0.26, there's 0.59 extra Luna. And when we look at the UST differences, there's a massive difference. So in Terraswap, there's 1217 of UST. And in the Luna-HODL, there's only $1,191. But there's this 0.59, there's a lot of extra Luna. What happened there? The price of Luna went down to 77.40. And remember, Luna-HODL is just an LP of two LPs. So what would an LP do? An LP would rebalance from the stronger asset of the pool, or in this case, when there's two LPs, the stronger of the two LPs when Luna is falling is going to be the Luna UST. Well, what would happen in a normal LP is the stronger asset would rebalance to the weaker asset. You would end up with less of the stronger asset and more of the weaker asset. And the weaker LP of the two LPs is the Luna bLUNA pool. And that's why I believe we have less UST, 1191 versus 1217. So keep in mind, this was Monday at 10 p.m. We started Saturday at 8 p.m. And if I fast forward all the way to Thursday at 8:40 p.m., and this is the end of the study period, note that Luna only went from 77.40 to 78.60, and the amount of UST in the Luna UST pool went from 1217 to 1230. So a pretty good jump. But from the Luna-HODL, it went from 1191 to 1196. And I would contend that this is from the constant rebalancing from, again, the stronger pair, the Luna UST, collecting more fees and scraping that and rebalancing to a stronger Luna bLUNA position, hence ending up with more of a Luna differential. We went from 0.59 on Monday. We started at 0.26 extra Luna because of that imbalance. But we went from 0.26 on a Saturday to 0.59 on a Monday, and by Thursday we're all the way up to 0.70. And this is because of that constant scraping. Now, what's really interesting is when I go to exit the pool, and I put side by side the initial transaction, because you remember I started with 21.395 Luna bLUNA LP tokens. But notice when I exit the pool, I exit when it says transfer 11.042647 ULP to my wallet. I'm transferring it out of Luna-HODL to my wallet, and I still had to cash it out of Terraswap. But notice that I have 11, but half of 21 is less than 11, because double 11 is 22. And in fact, if I just go back to the transaction, if you remember, I put in 10.766179, and that was on a Saturday. When I exited, it's not 10.7. I have 11.04. So my theory is correct that I actually ended up with more Luna LP tokens, and that the LP of an LP, it took from the stronger pair and moved it to the weaker pair, which is the Luna because the price of Luna was falling. Similarly, you can see I had a total of 122 LP tokens, and if you remember, I put in exactly half. So 61.32 is what I deposited in Luna-HODL, but I only took out 59.59, and that's because the Luna-HODL rebalanced it. Unfortunately, I didn't do my control group and my experimental group when Luna was going up, but thankfully somebody did something at least. FinTurn from terraspaces.org. If you're not listening to terraspaces.org, you have to check them out. Pretty much any space that ever goes on from anybody, any AMA, all the Cephii spaces, they're being recorded by this man. He's a saint. He was in Luna-HODL from this time here. I believe it was February 22nd when Luna was in the low to mid 50s. And he actually was in the whole time, but I just took a screenshot of February 22nd to February 25th, where the pool looks very, very similar. But you can see Luna shot from the 50s to the 60s and even 70s. He doesn't even know what time of day he took these screenshots. But the first part, what you can see here is he has the same amount of Luna-HODL tokens, this 130 amount of Luna-HODL, 177 Luna, 90.65 bLUNA, 4731 of UST. Fast forward to the 25th, what you're going to see is the amount of UST in there, which is approximately a quarter of the pool, right? It increased in value tremendously. There's 5673 of total UST value. There's less Luna, 89.54, bLUNA, and there's only 164 Luna. And that's because in the Luna UST part, a lot of the Luna left of that part of the LP to the UST. Now, what is interesting is above that, you can see the amount of total LP tokens in the Luna-HODL. Now, what we don't know is we don't know if people took money or tokens in or out of the pool. But what's interesting is if they didn't, you can see that on February 22nd, when the price of Luna was low, there were 327 LP tokens in the Luna and 1407 Luna UST tokens. There needs to be an equal amount or pretty close to it. Like, we know there's skew over time, but it needs to be pretty close. And what's interesting is 5 days later, you can see that there's actually less Luna instead of 327, there's 323. And there's more Luna UST. Instead of 1407, there's 1430. And again, when the price of Luna is rising, the stronger pair of this LP of an LP is going to be the Luna because both of those track Luna's value as they rise. Versus in the Luna UST, yes, the value of that pool has to go up, but since half of it is a stable coin, it's not going to increase in value at the same velocity that the Luna is. There's going to be a rebalancing within that pool. And so the Luna-HODL, which is an LP of an LP, is now going to rebalance the other way. It's going to rebalance out of the Luna stronger pair into the weaker pair, which in this case, when Luna is rising, is the Luna UST. So I thought this was very, very interesting. And I think Luna-HODL can be a great way to hold your Luna. If you are trying to hold Luna, it can be an awesome way to play both LPs, whether on your way up or on your way down. I've heard from a lot of people on the way down, they want to end up with more Luna and they don't care if they lose total value. Well, this is a way to end up with even more Luna. On the way up, it will help dollar cost average you out, but to a lesser rate than if you just held the Luna UST, because it's really 3 parts Luna and only 1 part UST versus half and half. But it'll still cause some systematic skew and leaning towards dollar cost averaging out of Luna into UST, but I've heard from some people that, hey, maybe they want to pay back their loan. You know, they don't want to necessarily sell tops or take profits, and they don't know where that is. And what I can tell you from being in these LPs, as long as the price is, whether it's accelerating or going down, when you're in the LP, the extra advantage of getting those fees, when you calculate how that looks, you end up with more than if you just tried to kind of pick the top or the bottom yourself. You actually end up getting closer to dollar cost averaging the bottom or dollar cost averaging out and selling the top. You'll get closer if you're doing it in an LP structure. So to illustrate this point, I'm going to share with you my data from entering the Luna-HODL when Luna was at 86.22 and exiting when Luna was 78.60. And if you remember, I entered with 90.13 Luna, 30 Luna, 30 Luna, and 30.13 bLUNA, and I exited with 92.22 Luna, therefore gaining 2.08 Luna in those 5 days. Now, because the total value of the pool lost, because Luna went from 86 to 78, I lost $149.79 worth of UST, which made my average cost of the 2.08 Luna gained $71.88 per Luna. Now, what's interesting is that average cost of $71.88 per Luna is lower than the lowest price that Luna touched during the entire 5-day span, which was $73.95. Why did I get a lower price? Well, it's because of the fee accrual and the rebalancing that the Luna-HODL does, scraping from the Luna UST, which is earning more fees and the stronger pair during that time, and moving it over to the Luna bLUNA pair. And so what's really interesting, what I like about LPs with stablecoins in a down market, is it really works out to be a rebalancer bot with fees, in that it is going to rebalance to Luna during a steadily declining market. But because of that extra accrual of fees and the extra rebalancing that Luna-HODL does, I actually get a lower price than Luna even touched upon during that moment. Now, I believe the same thing to be true in an up market, in that if you're trying to dollar cost average out of Luna or sell at or near a top, and you don't want to worry about timing it perfectly, you could use the Luna-HODL for this purpose, because at that point, the Luna UST pool will be the weaker of the two LPs, and obviously the weaker of the pair of Luna UST. And so you'll end up with a disproportionate amount of UST and less Luna on the way up. Now, I don't know if you'll end up selling at the actual top, possibly, especially due to the accrual of fees, but it really depends on how steep that move is on the way up, or in my case, on the way down. The steeper the move, it may take, the fees may not be able to catch up with that, to where you may not catch the dead bottom or the dead top in really steep moves. But in choppy markets or steadily declining or ascending markets, I believe that the Luna-HODL will work in this way. Just a few random notes about Miaw-Trader. So it is an unaudited protocol, so everybody has to use at their own risk. I know I treaded lightly at first, and then as transactions went through without me being rugged, I got more and more confident, and I haven't had a problem to date, whether it be doing limit orders or the LP tower or their own native staking. And you can actually look at their wallet address and see that there's quite a bit of assets. So if they were going to rug, there's a good chance they already would have. Phil Dees, or Phildo Baggins, is kind of the unofficial ambassador of Miaw-Trader, and I was asking him about it, and he did some homework and found that the dev really only takes 1% of all the revenue, and normal is 5% apparently. So he's really, really bullish on what they're doing. Their tokenomics are incredibly favorable, similar to Luna, in that they're deflationary. There's burn mechanisms in place. And so he, in his words, he gets really good vibes. That and the fact that they were updating the protocol like mad before Christmas. And he thinks, he doesn't really know, but he believes that these devs have been pulled into other projects to where they can't focus as much time, but they built something really cool and really special here. Definitely give Phildo Baggins a follow, and anytime you mention Miaw-Trader, count on getting at least a response, or possibly even a really cool cat meme. So I'll leave you with this one vision I had after learning about this cool phenomenon from this little boutique protocol. What if with a click of a button, you can pick and choose which assets or LPs you wanted to stitch together and HODL and combo together? It's almost like building your portfolio. As long as you're choosing assets that you don't mind ending up with anyway, all of it could be yield bearing, yield accruing. Pretty cool, right? Whether it's a Miaw-Trader or maybe someone like a Spectrum protocol that already has auto compound, auto stake as an option, or maybe someone like a Thorchain who's already doing all these cross-chain LPs as it is. Stranger things have happened and anything's possible in DeFi. So let's see.